David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
I know that what I'm about to ask you to do is sort of difficult to do because it's exploding in our faces every single day. But imagine just for a second, if you can, and this will be easy for some people in our audience, that there were no Russia story, right? Imagine that there were no investigations into Donald Trump, no indictments, no attempts to obstruct the investigation by firing all sorts of people. Put the entire thing aside for a moment, which again, I think a lot of people in our audience will actually not have trouble doing, but some of you will. We've now learned about a completely separate Trump campaign scandal, which has exploded in the last 24 hours because of a really, really good investigation published by Britain's Channel 4. And the company in question here is Cambridge Analytica. That's not Cambridge, Massachusetts, right near our studio, but that's Cambridge, UK. And they also play a role in today's major breaking story about Facebook, which we will get to later on in the program. Cambridge Analytica calls themselves a big data, behavioral micro-targeting, political campaign support firm. At least that's what they call themselves on Twitter. And what they do, it turns out, is a combination of opposition research and social media targeting, along with, we have now learned, blackmail scams, bribes, the hiring of prostitutes to set up honey traps, as well as perpetuating fake news. The Channel 4 documentary, which you should absolutely watch, first part is out about 20 minutes. I believe a second part is upcoming. The documentary exposes their techniques, and it goes all the way up to the top. And when I say all the way up to the top, I don't mean close to the top or near the top. I mean to the absolute top. And what Channel 4 did is create an undercover investigation where they had an individual posing as a Sri Lankan who was working with a family in Sri Lanka, and the family had aspirations for political office in Sri Lanka. And what they wanted to meet with Cambridge Analytica to do was to sort of interview Cambridge Analytica to see if we want to run, if our family member wants to run for elected office in Sri Lanka, could you help us? What would you be able to do in order to help us? And after just a couple of initial meetings, the fake possible client, which was really an undercover investigator working with Channel 4, ends up meeting with none other than the head of Cambridge Analytica, Alexander Nix. And Alexander Nix is a guy who is a public figure. He has spoken at conferences all around the world about just the amazing and great things that Cambridge Analytica does. And he gets caught on hidden camera in this Channel 4 investigation, talking about how his firm has lots of experience bringing in prostitutes to set up politicians. He specifically suggests the idea of Ukrainian prostitutes as a possible agents of help with this Sri Lankan campaign. He talks about what Cambridge Analytica has done, how they are experts in this stuff. His co-conspirator in the image we're showing our television audience now sitting to Nix's right, talking about how they are masters of disguise in doing this type of thing. And this is yet another story that connects directly to the Oval Office and to Jared Kushner and to Stephen Bannon, who at one point was a part owner of Cambridge Analytica, a stakeholder in Cambridge Analytica. This company was Donald Trump's campaign consultant for 2016. And this raises a whole new and separate specter of suspicion on Donald Trump's campaign. So now, if you want, you can totally disregard the Russia story. Not that it's going away. I just mean if you're thinking about how Trump won, you can temporarily put aside all of the Russia stuff. And now we have to explore whether Donald Trump won, at least in part, because of the actions of a firm that uses prostitutes and blackmail and entrapment and bribes. So here's how this is going to go. It's already happening to some degree. Cambridge Analytica will deny using these tactics in their work for Trump. They'll also deny it more broadly, but I'll get to that in a second. Trump and his team will say, listen, we did some work with Cambridge Analytica. It was very minor. It was just social media targeting, and that's it. we will all be incredibly skeptical, and hopefully investigative journalists will start digging into the detail about exactly which tactics Cambridge Analytica did use to help Donald Trump in his 2016 campaign. And it might come out that, yeah, Cambridge Analytica merely did some Facebook targeting for Trump with some of that data that they got from Facebook, which we'll talk about later today. It might come out that Cambridge Analytica did much, much more for Donald Trump. But what is without question is that this is one of the biggest corporate embarrassments in a long time. And it's clear that Cambridge Analytica is clueless about how to respond to this because their top people are on video admitting to this stuff. Watch the 19 or 20-minute documentary, and you will see Alexander Nix and Turnbull, Mark Turnbull, or I forget his first name, Turnbull, who is the co-partner there, the other partner, talking about all the things they have done and can do and would suggest doing. So let's now go through some of the responses and defenses from Cambridge Analytica, which are just the best. I'm relishing truly seeing this stuff. First, this one's sort of minor. The official Twitter account for Cambridge Analytica sent out a tweet about the Channel 4 documentary where they said, tonight's Channel 4 news story gives a highly misleading picture of the company and what we do. Yeah, it's misleading because not only do they hire prostitutes for honey traps and create blackmail videos, they'll also give you advice about how to run Google ads. So yeah, that wasn't really made a big part of the Channel 4 investigation. Should have been included in the interest of full disclosure. Next, Cambridge Analytica floats the idea that it was all a joke about hiring prostitutes, that the mention of the hiring prostitutes was a way to figure out whether their potential Sri Lankan client had bad intentions. They were trying to see, is the Sri Lankan client immoral? Because we would never do any of this stuff. We were trying to suss it out. Here's a quote from the statement that Cambridge Analytica put out. This is just, have the barf bags nearby, please. They said, despite this clear statement, the undercover reporter later attempted to entrap, it's all projection, Cambridge Analytica entraps. And now they're saying someone else tried to entrap them. Attempted to entrap Cambridge Analytica executives by initiating a conversation about unethical practices. After several meetings discussing ostensibly legitimate projects, the reporter unexpectedly and suddenly turned the conversation towards practices such as corruption and the entrapment of political figures. Assessing the legality and reputational risks associated with new projects is critical for us, and we routinely undertake conversations with prospective clients to try to tease out any unethical or illegal intentions. That is just the best. And then they go on to say the two Cambridge Analytica executives at the meeting humored these questions and actively encouraged the prospective client to disclose his intentions. It's just a lie. I mean, if you watch the 20-minute documentary, you will see that the questions from the undercover reporter are so general, like, can you tell me about the type of opposition research that you do? And the CA people, the Cambridge Analytica people, volunteer. There's opposition research, but there's more than opposition research. They volunteer all of the stuff. And the idea that they were merely trying to suss out and were humoring and testing out the undercover reporter is ridiculous. And case in point, within just a few meetings, they bring along their top guy, Alexander Nix, the head of the company. Cambridge Analytica reportedly has, according to Crunchbase, between 100 and 250 employees. When they suspect a client of maybe pulling their leg or having bad intentions, they send in their CEO, the top guy, to meet directly with this person. Who on earth would believe this explanation? And the bigger concern is that, I mean, listen, these people are horrible, right? This is not democracy. This is a perversion of the democratic system. And the big picture here is that it connects directly to Trump, and right-wing media is ignoring that connection. It connects to Stephen Bannon because he held a stake. He was part owner in Cambridge Analytica until he started working for the Trump organization, Trump campaign, Trump administration, and sold his stake in CA, although very, very late. And according to reports, it also appears that it was Jared Kushner who wanted to hire this firm in the first place. And it just so happens that Kushner's family has a history of entrapping people with sex. Jared Kushner's father, Charles Kushner, hired a prostitute to sleep with his sister's husband and then used it as leverage against him. And it just so happens that Jared Kushner wants to hire a company that we now know engages in similar practices. This is a whole new scandal, right? It is a whole new scandal in the Trump administration. Right-wing media is going way out of its way to keep this out of the headlines. Check this out from this morning. I just said, let's just see what's going on different right-wing news websites. Drudge Report, you go there, Jared and the Prince, you see stories about just about everything other than this major, major story. Go to foxnews.com. What do you see? Another blast rocks Texas. Not that that's not a story. We're going to be talking about that story tomorrow. And all sorts of other stuff, but not this. You go to Ben Shapiro's right-wing news website, Daily Wire. Package with shrapnel explodes at Texas FedEx facility. Will Germany block Israel from finally getting a seat on the UN? Progressive groups looking to organize march in support of Louis Farrakhan. Palestinian terrorists murder 3 young Jews, a boss silent. But nothing about this major, major story. And I could go on with other examples. It's like it just doesn't exist. And this is ultimately the problem. Because of the filter bubbles and the echo chambers and the algorithms, tons of people will never hear about this. Or by the time they do, they'll inherently assume, if I haven't heard about this until now, it must not really be a big story. That is one of the biggest problems here, that this, putting aside everything else that's going on in connection with the Trump administration right now, this is a major new scandal, and so many people will never hear about it. And if they do, it'll be half-baked, harebrained attempts to debunk the entire story. But there's no debunking. And the flaccid attempts from Cambridge Analytica to say, oh, it's all misleading, and we were just testing them, we were just joking about all this stuff. It's BS, and I hope somehow it gets through to the committed Trumpists, although, quite frankly, I'm not super optimistic about that. Send me your thoughts about this story or any other from today. I'm on Twitter at @DPakman. The show is on Twitter at David Pakman Show.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Edith Hammond. Edith, thank you. Thank you for supporting the program. And today's sustaining member of the day is Gary Walborn, who's been with us since 2011, almost 7 years of membership for Gary. I can't thank our new members like Edith and our sustaining members like Gary enough. You can join them at 40% off using the coupon code VOTESOON18 at davidpakman.com/membership, and Patreon contributions also welcome at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. We are in the throes of one of the biggest tech privacy scandals in a very long time. It's now apparent that the data analytics firm Cambridge Analytica, which worked for the Trump campaign, we learned over the last 24 hours based on a Channel 4 report that they engage in everything from the hiring of prostitutes to blackmail setups and entrapment in order to work for their clients. Cambridge Analytica, working for the Trump campaign in the most recent presidential election, inappropriately gained access to the data of 50 million Facebook users. The data of those 50 million users ended up in the hands of Cambridge Analytica, and according to some reports, has not been deleted. Cambridge Analytica says that they don't have the data. It's unclear. Facebook saying we've asked them to delete it, but they haven't, and a completely different story being told by CA. When I heard that please delete, it reminds me of when Hillary went to Wall Street and told them, hey, you've got to cut it out. Right, I'm sure they'll get right on deleting that incredibly valuable data about 50 million Facebook users. And the details of this are somewhat complex. They involve a particular app made by a University of Cambridge lecturer called This Is Your Digital Life, all one word, no spaces. This Is Your Digital Life. The app launched in 2014, and the app, through an entity called Global Science Research, took users to a survey. These surveys are common online, and the survey paid them $1 or $2, and as most of these apps do, it requested access to Facebook user information. 270,000 users went ahead and gave the app that permission. But the app was able to also harvest information of a total of 50 million users, most of whom did not give permission, like the 270,000 users. Now, this is already bad enough, but we've also learned that the professor working on this, Alexander Kogan, who ironically enough might be Russian, was actually working on the behalf of Strategic Communication Laboratories, which owns Cambridge Analytica, and who was working for the Donald Trump campaign. Full circle once again. Cambridge Analytica, who's dealing with multiple scandals at once at this point, is saying they didn't know where the data came from, that this is all GSR and Kogan, and they weren't told exactly how they got the data. And of course, if they had known how they got the data, they would have turned it down. Now, does anybody believe that the company that has no problem using prostitutes for honey traps and blackmail entrapment would have a problem receiving Facebook user data if they knew where it came from? I'm having a hard time with that. Cambridge Analytica says in a statement, quote, when it subsequently became clear that the data had not been obtained by GSR in line with Facebook's terms of service, Cambridge Analytica deleted all data received from GSR. So that I don't believe. But the big question, Cambridge Analytica aside, is, was Facebook complicit? And if so, to what degree? And the answer is, we don't know. Mark Zuckerberg is now being summoned by British officials, British elected officials. The FTC, Federal Trade Commission in the United States, is starting to look into Facebook. And here's really the bottom line. I hate to break it to you, and I don't think this is going to be news to a lot of people in our audience. This is Facebook's business model. Now, yeah, this went further. But if you listen to my interview about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I don't remember exactly how long ago, with Antonio Garcia Martinez, who developed a lot of the Facebook ad infrastructure. If you read his book, Chaos Monkeys, Facebook is fundamentally a user data firm, right? It's not a social network primarily. It's not a marketer. It's not a messaging app, even though it does those things and has those features. This is a user data company. And Edward Snowden tweeted something along these lines when the news broke, saying businesses that make money by collecting and selling detailed records of private lives were once plainly described as surveillance companies. Their rebranding as social media is the most successful deception since the Department of War became the Department of Defense. I learned in an early college communication class a line that goes something like this. If you're not sure what the product is and you're not paying for anything, it's probably you. Or said another way, the product is your attention. What is being bought and sold is getting your eyeballs onto an advertisement or a piece of content or whatever. And that is exactly what is going on here. Arguably, this went further, and we will see to what degree Facebook was aware of what was going on. What did happen immediately is that Facebook's stock price dropped when the news broke. This is probably not going to impact their bottom line directly, right? Advertisers advertising with Facebook, and we've advertised with Facebook, by the way, are doing it because Facebook has such great user data, not despite that reality. Yeah, this creates a PR problem for Facebook. It's going to make regulators want to regulate Facebook, but it's not really a business problem until the regulation actually hurts them. For the individual user, it's basically cost benefit, right? If you use Facebook, I use Facebook, Pat uses Facebook, we realize, or at least I think we would be wise to realize, that our data, our preferences, our likes, our friends, our activity, it could end up almost anywhere. Is that worth it to have Facebook and use Facebook? For a lot of people, it is. And there's a broader question here, right? What is the long-term impact of companies having such accurate and precise data about our preferences? We know that when it comes to news, the consequence of targeting at the level that is possible is echo chambers and algorithms that feed our biases and increase political partisanship. And that gets me to a really important line from Molly McHugh. Molly McHugh wrote a great article about this yesterday, where she says, it doesn't matter if you don't use your Facebook feed for politics. Your Facebook feed is using you for politics. And I think that that is something we all sort of need to be aware of here, right? With products and services, it's okay, well, they might be able to really well target, accurately target ads so that you'll buy stuff or sign up for services. With elections, it's potentially deciding the outcome of who our elected officials are. And thus, even if you say, I don't really read news on Facebook. I don't really care about this or that. I'm just on there for the pictures or sharing stuff with my family. Even if you aren't doing politics on Facebook, these algorithms are having political impact. I don't know, and I wouldn't even dream of trying to predict what is ultimately going to happen in terms of regulation. But this is only the beginning of that in terms of an FTC investigation and summons from the United Kingdom of Mark Zuckerberg, and we will see where it goes. But this is a major, major tech privacy scandal. You might have learned the other day that Russia had a, quote, election in which Vladimir Putin, quote, did really well, receiving, quote, almost 77% of the vote. Then we all woke up from that total fantasy world as dozens and dozens of videos of people literally stuffing ballot boxes with stacks of ballots have been released. We have a ton of videos of this. The Washington Post put one together where you can see people just putting stacks of paper into these ballots. And of course, the defense has been, well, that all these individuals might have collected a bunch of people's ballots and put them in at once. Do you see that that's how the polling place is set up? I mean, where are these ballots coming from? It makes absolutely no sense. And in order to make the absurd 77% of the vote number that Putin supposedly received appear slightly more mathematically believable, the opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, says that the official turnout numbers were also inflated, reported as 67.5%. Navalny saying that that's actually like 10 percentage points higher than the real turnout. Again, this is according to opposition candidate Navalny. 77% for Vladimir Putin, the highest ever in a Russian presidential election. Now, you might say to me, hey, David, listen, stuffing ballots into ballot boxes is a really low-tech and inefficient way to help Putin. If there was real centralized corruption here, you would do it in some other way. You're not going to physically send people out there to stuff ballot boxes. Well, that's right, but what you're forgetting is Putin didn't need these votes to win, right? I'm not saying Putin would have lost without the ballot stuffing. What I'm saying is he wouldn't have won by as much. It would have just been much closer. I don't even know that Putin necessarily needs to be in on this, Pat, because local governments want to please Putin. The last thing you want to be is the local official whose district didn't have a solid turnout for Putin. So I'm not even alleging necessarily that Vladimir Putin was directly coordinating this, but the defenses are just laughable.
Oh, here's one. Putin's approval rating is something like 81%, 83%, and that's in line with the percentage of the vote that he got. So it must have been fine.
It must have been fine. There's absolutely no problem whatsoever. One other funny video to show you. Here, someone places a bunch of balloons right in front of the camera at a polling place. A woman walks over and then just casually, all of a sudden, exactly where the camera is, she just moves a bunch of balloons right in front. This is just the best, isn't it? You would think that at this point we would want to be beyond this type of stuff, but we're not. And a funny defense of the videos is, okay, fine, listen, David, you're right. It's ballot stuffing. But we don't know which candidate's supporters are stuffing the ballots. You can't say for sure that those are Putin ballots that are being stuffed in there. Give me a break, right? In order to believe that these were opposition ballot stuffings, you have to first explain how were they able to get away with that despite Putin's cronies controlling endless numbers of polling places. And that would also imply that Putin didn't just set a record with 77% of the vote. He arguably had even more of the vote, but because of opposition ballot stuffing, the number was inaccurately low. I mean, who would believe that stuff? You've got to suspend disbelief in total to believe that.
And people are still questioning whether or not Russia influenced the U.S. presidential election. They're doing it for their own elections. Of course they are.
There is a tweet that was put out by Edward Snowden about this as well. And this is twice now that I'm quoting Edward Snowden today. And I am no big defender of Snowden, but when he says something that I believe is accurate, I'll tell you, Snowden tweeted, "The ballot stuffing seen today in Moscow and elsewhere in the Russian election is an effort to steal the influence of 140 million plus people. Demand justice, demand laws, and courts that matter. Take your future back." Want to make one other comment about this, okay? And this is a comment about the toxic left, as I'm calling it. Pat's taking feverish notes now. There is this contingent I've mentioned before of sort of Leninist Hugo Chavez loving so-called leftists who are saying there's nothing to see in terms of Russian influence in the United States. There's nothing to see in terms of ballot stuffing in Russia either. We have irregularities here in the United States as well. So who are we to pass judgment on what's going on in Russia's elections? Have fun with that. Just stay away from me. I have no interest in even engaging with you. Discuss this with us on our subreddit, davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Coming up next, I'm ready for this. Good old-fashioned exorcism. Stay with us.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Here's something different that I think you'll also find very interesting. Today, I'm speaking to Rachel Stavis, who's a non-denominational exorcist, whose memoir, Sister of Darkness, is out, and it tells her story of exorcist training, extreme cases, and sort of what it takes to complete an exorcism. So I'm super interested in this, and I really appreciate you talking to me about it. How did you even find your way into being an exorcist?
Well, when I was a kid, I always, like other kids, complained about seeing monsters under the bed and monsters in the closet. And then, parents would come in, right, and check and say there's nothing there. But for me, it never went away. So I've actually been able to see entities with my eyes since I was a child. I didn't really want to, naturally. It was really scary. And I thought that, everybody must be doing this until I learned very quickly you don't talk about it. So I tried to push it away, kind of have a normal life, become a writer, do all the normal things. And then as I got older, it became more basically impossible to block it out anymore. And at that point, I had to make a decision. What am I going to do? Am I going to check myself in, or am I actually going to do something with this? And that's when I decided, okay, there's a reason, right? Reason for everything. So there's a reason for why I have this. And it turns out it was exorcism.
And as an example, what was something you were seeing or that you see that caused this, that sort of catalyzed this?
Well, I wasn't able to categorize them until I started getting older and accepting the fact that I was looking at this, but I would see very similar things over and over again. So, just to kind of give some background, when people think about exorcism and they think about entities or what people call demons, they kind of think of the movies, right? Where it's like one specific kind of demon and they're all kind of the same, and you say their name and you throw some holy water and it's gone. That's not actually how it works. It's almost, if you will, a species, a many different species of demons. There's lots of different ones. So to make a long story short, right, what I was seeing looked like monsters, and there are all different kinds of them. There's probably thousands of different kinds of entities. I probably still have yet to see them all.
Right.
But there are some that are really common, which people carry very often. It's not as uncommon to have attachment as people believe.
So it's very common that the concept of a demon is associated with not just religion in general, but particular religions. Now, I know you're non-denominational, but is there a religious underpinning to what you do?
Hard to say.
Well, let me put it a different way. Are you, like, for example, are you a Christian?
No.
You're not.
No.
Are you Catholic?
None of these things.
Okay.
I'm
all right.
literally denominational, right? But that doesn't mean that I don't believe and work with high beings. So let me give you some background, right, on this. The way that I work is really different than probably any other exorcist or exorcism thing that people have ever encountered.
I agree.
And that's because I work in energy and frequency, right? So if you think about it, just on a logical level, right? We are all energy. We all emit an energy every single day. And the way
are we though? I mean, we're made up of matter, which has potential energy. And of course, we consume food, and that potential energy is converted into kinetic energy. But I don't know, in what sense are we energy?
Well, so we emit frequency every single day. That's something that actually you can look up. We have energetic frequencies that we put out into the world. From what I work in, right? Thoughts, words, actions, we're all emitting an energy that goes out into the world. We're carrying it with us. We go through the world a specific way. And it's our energy signature, what we carry. And that doesn't change that much throughout the day. So if you have a good day, it might be a little better. If you have a bad day, right? Exactly.
And
so
this is measured how? In other words, what device can evaluate how that energy sort of changes throughout the day? What's the scale of measurement?
Well, we don't really have that yet. That's the issue, right?
Oh.
So I work with spirit. That's how I see it. So
Got it.
whether you believe in that or you don't is up to you, right? So I work with spirit. I work with energies. I can see these energies with my eyes. So therefore, to me, that exists, right? So it depends on your belief system, right?
Absolutely.
So in the day when we go out and we have this, it's pretty much the same. The only time that it changes is when we have a trauma. Okay, when we have a trauma, it affects us and our energy then dips low. We have low frequency situations that we're now emitting. That's how attachment finds us. Attachment works in low frequency.
And when you say low, can we just define low frequency? Because frequency, we're talking about wave theory, and frequency is like a specific element of wave theory. Are you talking about hertz as in sort of audio, like an audio wave? Or when you say low frequency, how is that defined?
So for me, the way that I see it, it's almost like, okay, yes, it's like what you're saying. So for me, when I look at it, I can see people's, how do you define this? It's not quite aura, but do you know what I mean? Like it's
so you see the energy. I'm curious because you called it low frequency, which is normally something that would be detected either orally, like AUR, not ORR, AUR, like in terms of sound, but the low frequency, you actually see it visually.
I see it visually. And my vernacular, where I get all these words, I work with spirit, and that's the information that I get when I ask.
The spirits have given you this sort of vocabulary that you use.
Right. So in other words, too, like not everyone agrees with calling demon entity.
Right.
Right? I always call it entity.
Sure.
Not everybody will agree with calling all of this spirit. That's what I call it. Right? So define it however you like. Let's just put it that way.
Got it.
For me, it's the perspective to just help you understand what I'm seeing.
I think I'm understanding, yeah.
Yeah, like what it is and how I define it might be different for other people. Just like people always ask me, when you see entity, like the way it shows itself to you, is that how it actually looks, or is that, whatever? And I don't have the answer for that, right? I can only tell you this is how it presents itself to me.
Got it. Now, Rachel, let me ask you this. Why do you believe that you have this ability to do exorcism? And it's sort of related to my other question, which is, in the Catholic Church, it's believed that the skill of exorcism is a skill that can be learned. On the other hand, you have people who work more in the psychic medium side who believe that this is just something that you are born with and you either have or you don't. Is your skill for exorcism more on the Catholic Church learn a skill side, or is it more on the something more ethereal and God-given, or whatever term you want to apply to it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, if you really want to know. Like, I think there's a certain amount of, like, why do I have it?
Right.
I don't know. I was able to bring it to the world. Maybe that's why I'm teaching people, what this is. And again, like, it's not, listen, I'm not for everybody. It's not for everybody.
Sure.
But for those people who want to receive the message, they get it. They understand it.
So in other words, if somebody was not sort of open to the idea that people could be infested by demons and that an exorcism could cure it or relieve that, what you do wouldn't be for them, in other words.
Not necessarily, although I do also work in trauma and pain. So, I do take that out of the body as well. And again, we're talking about something that I see, right? I see and I feel. Yeah. So, how do you define that? How do you measure that? It's really hard to say. I can't tell you exactly how to do that. But, if even for people who've come to me that don't necessarily believe that they have attachment, or, and I've had a lot of skeptics come through here. Like, it's not for people who are like, I'm totally down for an exorcism. I do get a lot of people who are like, I don't believe in this at all, but somebody had a good experience and I'm desperate, so let's try it, right?
So some people come to you out of desperation. In other words, they're in such a state that they'd be willing to accept just anything that might give any sign of improvement, that they've sort of gotten to that point, and they arrive for an exorcism on that basis.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about it, if you just think about it, going to an exorcist is everybody's last resort.
Right.
This is not the first resort situation, right? You
Right.
feel like I've tried everything. I don't even know about this. This
Yeah.
really weirds me out, but I'm going to give it a try.
Right.
And it's, you know what? Those are my favorite people actually to take, because those are the people who come in. They don't want to tell me anything, right? They want to keep it all to themselves. And then they're like, let's just do this. And I'm like, okay, let's just do it. And by the end of it, they're like in shock and in disbelief that they feel different, really
Right.
different, you know? So that's
And
always
what's the process of the exorcism? Like, and without, I mean, we don't need to get into the full logistics, but just so our audience has a sense of physically what it is that happens during an exorcism. What's that like?
for them or for me.
Well, what are you doing to or around them?
Okay, so that goes back to the religious question, right? So I'm not religious, but
Yeah.
I do work with high beings, as above, so below. That's the feeling, right? So if we have all these low things that we're trying to expel, then we need to call in high things to help expel that.
Right.
And so I work with high beings. The high beings meaning, spirit guides, master teachers, yeah, religious figures, because that's still a high being, all different kinds, so that people feel comfortable. So if you come to me and you're religious, it works for you too, because that's something that I can call in for you.
So what do you, like, you call in a rabbi and he kind of blesses
no,
it like he would matzah or?
No, I mean high beings, like what people would call gods, what people call gods, what people, you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like
Oh, yeah.
spirit, angels, like archangels, things like that.
Got it.
That's what I call in. And the way that I work is I call them in to put energy through the body. So if you're in a place of low energy in the body, and that's what's causing that attachment, we have to fill you with the high being energy to pull that out, to make that come out of the body.
Right. They've got to be full of it. Yeah.
Yeah. During that process, there's other things that go on, like I have shamanic tools that work, like rattles and things like that, things that agitate that energy. I use specific incenses and burns that cleanse the space and cleanse the energy.
Is lavender persimmon one of the ones you use, or are there like specific ones that are exorcism approved?
No, we're talking about things like copal, frankincense, even sometimes things like blue lotus, wolfsbane, like some of it's fairly hardcore.
Yeah.
Some of you don't want to be investing like at home or
yeah, right. So, and then how long does this thing take or last?
It depends on the entity. Like I said, there are many different kinds. Some are more malevolent and more difficult to remove than others. So some people carry what I call a trickster, which is something that creates a symbiotic relationship with the host. That's, sometimes kids will get that when they're young, and it'll be something that's an imaginary friend, a genie, a deceased loved one, an angel.
Yeah.
And oftentimes those create, something that is hard to take out, right? Because they technically want it. But then there are some that people have that are just kind of like leeches, like amplifiers of emotions, just kind of make things worse. And those are pretty simple to take out. So it could go anywhere from 45 minutes to several days, depending on how bad.
Is the charge, the cost of this different depending on whether it's a 45-minute in or out or like a several day session?
Well, I don't charge for it.
You don't charge at all?
No.
So how do you make a living? How do you pay for the space where these events are taking place?
I'm a screenwriter. I've been a writer for many, many years. I want to say 15 years now.
Yeah. Rachel, you just cut out there for a second, Rachel. You said for 15 years you've been a screenwriter, right?
Yes. So I make a good living. I don't charge people for my services there, because I actually believe that because look, I work on people who are very, very wealthy, studio heads, rock icons, all of these things.
Yeah.
And I also work on people who have very little. So I like to have everyone come in here as equal. This is an equal place. We're no different in here.
Amazing. Well, let's pause there just briefly. We're speaking with non-denominational exorcist Rachel Stavis, and we'll continue our conversation with her momentarily.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions, our buddy, might have committed perjury again. Remember that Jeff Sessions just fired Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe for, in part, this is just so funny, lack of candor during testimony. We already know that back in March of 2017, in a hearing, Jeff Sessions said he had no communication with Russians during the Trump campaign. We later learned that he actually had multiple communications with Russians. This was the first lie from this sort of series of lies. Of course, there are lots of other Jeff Sessions lies unrelated to this series, but just as a reminder, this is how that went down when being questioned by Al Franken.
And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
Total lie, probably perjury. He'll never get in trouble for it, though. Fill the swamp and move on. Okay, we thought we were done and beyond it. But Sessions testified again a couple of times, including in November of 2017. And that time, it was before the House Judiciary Committee. And it appears that Sessions also lied during that hearing. He was asked about now indicted Trump advisor George Papadopoulos. Papadopoulos had proposed that Donald Trump's campaign reach out to Russia during that meeting that took place on March 31st of 2016. Trump was at that meeting. Sessions was at that meeting. Other top Trump staff were at that meeting. Sessions claimed during the testimony that he pushed back against that he thought reaching out to Russia was a bad idea, and that he wanted to make sure everybody in the room knew that he thought it was a bad idea. Unfortunately, it appears that that was also a lie, because Reuters is now reporting that 3 people who were at the meeting said, no, it's not true. Sessions expressed no objection whatsoever to reaching out to Russia. And these 3 individuals say they've also spoken to Robert Mueller's investigators and told Robert Mueller's team that it wasn't true what Jeff Sessions said. He posed no objection whatsoever to reaching out to Russia. Now, there is, I want to be thorough, I'm not hiding anything from you. There's a 4th person who was at the meeting who says, no, Jeff Sessions is telling the truth. He did push back. So currently it's 3-1 on this issue. We can think about who to believe, right? Do we believe the recused attorney general who's already been caught lying? Or do we believe the 3 people who were in the room and were interviewed by Robert Mueller's team and said, no, Sessions didn't push back at George Papadopoulos' suggestion that we reach out to Russia? You judge for yourself who you want to believe, but the really depressing part of all of this is that no one's going to go after Sessions for perjury, right? There have been no consequences for Sessions' lies back from March of 2017. There have been no consequences for Sessions for recusing himself on anything related to Russia and then firing people specifically to interfere with the Russia investigation as admitted by Donald Trump. They currently control every aspect of the government. They seem to be unable to control Robert Mueller, which is good, right? Like, we hope that they're not controlling Robert Mueller and that investigation will happen fully and fairly. But we're not going to see anybody within Trump's administration hold Jeff Sessions accountable here for recusing and then being involved and then lying once during testimony to the Senate and once during testimony, at least once during testimony to the House. Trump could remove Sessions for the lies. Yeah, right. And also, we could argue that firing Sessions in a way might be a step towards firing Mueller. But I think, Pat, we just have to come to terms with the reality that there's not going to be a repercussion for Sessions for having done this.
It's not going to happen. And unfortunately, I think Sessions' view in the public has been tarnished.
I agree.
Because for a time, even though we had disagreements with him, he could be seen as a patriot because he did decide to recuse himself. He's not a complete lackey for Trump, and it looks like he wasn't willing to make those contacts with Russia. Now we don't know what to believe.
Yeah, there was a period of about 3.5 minutes that Pat's referring to where we had plausible belief of what Jeff Sessions said before it was instantly fact-checked and we realized he was lying. I mean, no, it was longer than 3.5 minutes, but you're right. And it's not that I would call him a patriot.
Oh,
but
yeah, by
what you're
Trump
saying
administration standards.
By the standards of the committed Trumpist, which are shifting standards, by the way, you could sort of say, like, this guy is not the worst guy out there. But yeah, that's gone out the window. And we're going to have to just realize that hopefully some people will be held accountable for this entire thing that is being investigated. But we're going to have to come to terms with the reality that a lot of them just are not. They're not going to be held accountable. And It's sad. I don't know what else to tell you. I wish I had something else I could say, a word of inspiration, but I don't. The topic of abstinence-only sex education is resurfacing as a conservative Republican priority in the Trump era, which is just hilarious because of the number of sex scandals related to Trump, which directly contradict the concept of just abstaining from sex and also opposition to birth control. And historically, the right has had this totally illogical position on this issue, which is that they don't want abortions, but they want to teach abstinence-only sex education instead of comprehensive sex ed with access to affordable contraceptives. And the reason that it's incoherent is that we know that abstinence-only sex ed doesn't work, right? It leads to more pregnancy. And when you have more people getting pregnant without wanting to be pregnant, that increases the demand for abortion. So that's the general idea. But now we're hearing from the conservatives in the Department of Health and Human Services that they are now under Trump shifting back to pushing abstinence-only sex education. And they're just super excited. And the way that it's working is that under Title X has been around since Nixon. It's a federal grant that gives money to programs for family planning and preventive health services. And the idea that the Trump DHHS is using is when they get Title X requests, they are encouraging the recipients to push abstinence-only sex education if they want the money. And the funny and really sad part is that as this is happening, we're getting more and more data from when President Obama was president. And under Obama, we had a focus not on abstinence, but we had a focus on comprehensive sex ed, access to birth control. We saw a decline in teen pregnancy. In other words, as we are learning the obvious reality that the Obama approach reduced teen pregnancy, we are seeing the Trump DHHS go back to let's push abstinence-only education, which we know doesn't work. And not only doesn't it work, but the hypocrisy of the Trump administration promoting this is just laughable. Did Trump use contraception with Stormy Daniels to prevent pregnancy? If so, how can the administration credibly teach something different? And the answer is the results don't matter. The results have never mattered. I've spoken to you about this term, strict father morality, for a very long time. Even if you make the logical case to a conservative that, hey, your goal is reduce abortion. To do that, we've got to reduce unwanted pregnancy. The way to reduce unwanted pregnancy is access to birth control and comprehensive sex education. And you would think it would be an obvious yes to the conservative. But the strict father moralist of the religious right says no, because what you're doing is you are giving license for recreational, non-procreative sex outside of marriage. And really the priority is to prevent that, not to actually reduce the number of pregnancies, which reduces the number of abortions. And once you understand that, a lot of right-wing policy actually makes a lot more sense. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a nice little question from the audience. Let's take a listen. I love answering these questions.
Yeah, I was wondering if you support communism, which is basically social anarchism based on common ownership of the means of production, with money being abolished. That's all.
That's all. I do not support communism. I do not. And why do you think we get asked so often whether I support communism? Like, I feel like every time this comes up, I say, I am a supporter of well-regulated capitalist economies, sort of like the Scandinavian models that we see. And yet, maybe it's my suits, maybe it's my hair, I don't know what it is, but I constantly am answering this question. Am I a socialist? Am I a communist? I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, how does a caller watch the show every day, see us talk about politics and economics and all of these different topics, and come away with it thinking that maybe you are a communist?
I really don't know.
I have to call in just to make sure.
It's the frequency with which we get that question is stunning to me. And if somebody can explain it to me, it's not because I'm Jewish, is it, right? Like, I don't even want to open up that door, because that's another thing, like the stereotypical Jewish communist.
I don't even think you wear a red shirt on the program.
I know. I don't even think I own a red shirt. Never mind wear a red shirt on the program. Please tell me why it is that so many people think I might be a communist. All right, we've got a great bonus show for you today. I don't even have time to tell you what's on it, but trust me, it's a good one. Access it by becoming either a member or a patron, and we will speak to you then.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.